President Trump's poorly drawn and implemented executive order blocking refugees from the United States sacrifices fundamental American values and does not make us safer. For the first time in memory, the order imposes a ban on all refugees entering our country, many of whom are fleeing war or risk persecution for their religious or political beliefs. The order affects many thousands of children, women, and men whom our government has vetted for years and cleared for rescue. President Trump's action, taken in the first days of his new administration for political reasons, without regard to real-world consequences, and without the expertise of our national security professionals, or even some of those appointed by the President himself, represents a rare but shameful departure from a constitutional heritage that has made America strong and a beacon to oppressed people throughout the world. For generations, immigrants and refugees have come to our country, Mr. President, to flee religious persecution and to seek a better life. Indeed, these are the very people who founded our original colonies. Although as now we have occasionally failed to live up to our ideals, over generations the United States has accepted millions of refugees from around the world. My own family is part of this story, as so many people's family in this chamber are. My mom was born in Poland in 1938, while Nazi tanks massed at the border. She and her parents miraculously survived the Holocaust, one of the worst human events in history. After the war, after arriving in Sweden and then Mexico City, they were able to come to New York City in 1950. They wanted to come to the United States because it was the only country in the world where they believed they could rebuild their shattered lives. And they did. This weekend, my mom joined hundreds of thousands of Americans to call on the President to change course, knowing that our families' struggle in Europe require us to recognize the danger and persecution facing families throughout the Middle East today. Out of a population of 22 million, almost 5 million Syrians have fled to neighboring countries, some to Europe, and have registered as refugees. More than half of those displaced are children. According to the United Nations, more than half the remaining Syrian population, 6 million of them children, require assistance like food, water, and health care. Nearly 1 in 4 people in Lebanon tonight, is a Syrian refugee. And the 4th largest city in Jordan is now a refugee camp. In the wake of President Trump's refugee ban, it seems useful to ask, and I'm sure the American people are asking, why are so many millions of people fleeing their homes, their countries, and their history? They're doing it to save their lives, and in many cases, their children's lives, from ISIS's medieval barbarism and Assad's unrelenting brutality. They seek to escape the murder, rape, detention, and torture they suffer because of their religion or their ethnicity, or both. Assad is their enemy. ISIS is their enemy. Today's refugees are fleeing the violence and extremism that threatens our own national security. Their enemies are our enemies. And the same is true of the refugees from Afghanistan, from Libya, Somalia, and Sudan. Does this mean, Mr. President, that we have an obligation simply to open our borders to them? Of course not. We have a national security imperative to ensure that no terrorist tries to sneak into the United States as part of the refugee program. And I've long said that the burden of proof is not on the United States to accept a refugee. Rather, the refugee has the burden to demonstrate that they are not a threat to the United States. We have no obligation, nor should we, take anything on faith. And it's for this reason that refugees are more thoroughly vetted than anyone else entering the United States. They must pass stringent screening standards to ensure that they pose no threat, a process that can take up to 2 years. First, the United Nations screens them and collects biometric data. Only those who pass that test then are referred to the United States. And by the way, Mr. President, no refugee knows at that stage of the process to which country they'll be referred, to the United States or any other country that's accepting refugees. And after that, multiple agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the State Department, and our intelligence agencies conduct rigorous screenings. This process includes repeated biometric checks, several layers of biographical and background screening, health checks, interviews. Syrian refugees in particular receive enhanced scrutiny through an additional security risk review by specially trained officers. Out of the nearly 60,000 people referred to the United States, only about 12,000 have been accepted. Of those Syrian refugees accepted by the United States, 3/4 are women and children, and half were under 13 in 2016. We are the leader of the free world, a republic founded on the premise of religious freedom and a society that for generations has called out to the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to be free. That's who we are. Yet in the name of fighting terrorism, in his first week as president, Mr. Trump has sacrificed what has made us exceptional and has banned these children and their mothers from our shores. Children no different than Amran Daknish, whose distant stare from the back of an ambulance in Aleppo bore witness to the senseless violence he had suffered. Or Alan Kurdi, whose lifeless body on a Turkish beach condemned the worst savagery of humankind. Once he learns the details, if he chooses to study them, if President Trump wishes to make our vetting even more extreme than it already is, I guess he may do so. But banning refugees and prioritizing immigration by religion or ethnicity simultaneously abandons our principles and weakens our counterterrorism efforts. It sends the wrong message to our Muslim partners who fight with us in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, including civilians in those countries who have risked their lives alongside our troops. It also hands ISIS a recruiting tool by fueling their narrative that the Western and Muslim worlds cannot coexist in peace. If the president really wants to secure our borders and ensure extremists stay out of the country, there are far better alternatives. And there are alternatives that are not at war with who we are as Americans. We should work together to close security gaps in our visa waiver program and partner with European countries to better track the flow of foreign fighters throughout Europe and the Middle East. We should also do more to counter the ability of terrorists to radicalize and recruit, both here at home and abroad. We should do more to equip our agencies with tools and capabilities to degrade the ability of terrorist organizations, in particular ISIS, to persuade and inspire using social media. And Congress should enact ideas passed by the Senate in 2013 to strengthen border security, double the number of border agents, and address visa overstays. By tackling real vulnerabilities, Mr. President, and investing in smart security solutions, we can assure not only our borders, but also our values. And we will not repeat the darkest moments of our history when America turned away from those fleeing persecution around the world. Mr. President, a year ago, I came to the Senate floor to share a note sent to me by my grandparents on my first birthday. It's a message that bears repeating tonight. The year was 1965, 15 years after my mother and grandparents came to this country after surviving the horrors of the Holocaust in Poland. This is what they wrote. The ancient Greeks gave the world the high ideals of democracy, in search of which your dear mother and we came to the hospitable shores of beautiful America in 1950. We have been happy here ever since, beyond our greatest dreams and expectations, with democracy, freedom, and love, and humanity's greatest treasure. We hope that when you grow up, you will help develop in other parts of the world a greater understanding of these American values. Like so many immigrants, my grandparents knew how special these American values are and how rare they are. We cannot take them for granted or subvert them for a political moment. These values make us who we are. Edmund Burke once wrote, in history, a great volume is unrolled for our instruction, drawing the materials of future wisdom from the past errors and infirmities of mankind. This is a time when we can learn from the past errors and infirmities of humankind. We cannot turn our backs on women, children, and families who risk persecution, starvation, or death. The President should rescind this executive order. If not, the Senate should end the ban immediately and start a serious conversation on how to make our country safer in a manner that is consistent with our fundamental values.